You see my notes or you see the other?
No, I see your desktop.
Not the presentation.
Wait, actually, can you switch to the next slide?
Um,
Okay, good. It was just the tabs on the side. All good.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So again, I'm Janice Gobert, and I'm joined by Jen Lane, Science Supervisor from Brick Township Schools here in New Jersey, down on the South Shore, down the shore, as they say in New Jersey. So Inq-ITS was built on about $15 million of university funding from the U.S. Department of Ed and the National Science Foundation. We're really excited about this platform. It is now used in 50 states, and it's used in 12 countries, and teachers from I think another 45 countries have actually signed up to use it. So we're really excited to see that traction. So as for an overview, we're going to talk a little bit about Inq-ITS, what it is and what it does. We're going to talk about how Inq-ITS is being used for formative assessment in OpenSciEd, for OpenSciEd in Brick Township, and the impact on their state summative scores. We're going to show increases on the NGSS practices and the New Jersey clusters, which are student growth objectives identified by New Jersey. And these are scores that are clusters that are aggregated from the practices, the NGSS practices. And then we're going to show some specific examples with some data, and then we'll do a quick Q&A as well. So as we all know, American students perform poorly on STEM. On our last test, we were 18th on science, we were 37th on math, and our at-risk students are even lower. The NGSS is meant to improve students' competencies at authentic science, and it requires more labs, and it requires assessment. But these are really difficult things to do, and they're difficult things to assess. So for example, here we have the practices of NGSS: asking questions, developing models, planning investigations, analyzing and interpreting data, using mathematics, constructing explanations, engaging in argument from evidence, and communicating findings. So Inq-ITS auto scores all of these components using patented AI. As it's scoring, as the students are working in real time, teachers are getting real-time assessment data, real-time reports, and real-time alerts to guide instruction. So we'll be drilling down on that in a minute. So typical assessments are problematic for teachers. We've interviewed probably 600 teachers about this now. And we know that multiple choice and fill-in are not authentic. They only capture factual knowledge, very minimal reasoning. They're easy to grade, but it puts kids in 4 bins. And if students were easily put into 4 bins, our jobs as educators would be much easier than they are. Students can guess on multiple choice, so that's highly problematic. Moving to the bottom, on high-stakes summative tests, these often rely on multiple choice and open response items, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. The feedback is given too late to help students learn, and students may struggle in silence. With respect to lab reports, which is a commonly used assessment for teachers, they capture students' work products, but not the processes, not how students are going about doing the practices. These are difficult and time-intensive to grade, and they may not capture what students know and can do. In fact, we've shown in work in our lab, and this was published by U.S. News and World Report, that if teachers rely on lab reports, students are misassessed between 30 to 60% of the time. And that's because you have both kids who are parroting, and we've known about those kids who are parroting, but really don't understand the science and the practices they're talking about. Conversely, though, at the opposite end of the spectrum, you have kids who are really, really skilled in science and math, and they can do many of the practices, but when it comes to writing, they actually can't articulate what they know very well in words. So there's a lot of very high STEM kids who are like that. Also, from the point of view of ELLs, this is really difficult because children can understand far more than they can communicate. With respect to hands-on labs that are paired with lab reports, students often lack the skills to complete these independently. They require equipment, materials, setup time, space. They're very expensive for schools to purchase. They're difficult to grade, and the rigor and consistency is also difficult along the lines of what I just said. So here's an example. This is a class in which all students are doing science experiments, all at their own pace, possibly working on different experiments. And the teacher has got to assess these kids, right? So this is really difficult. So take Billy. Billy's a science genius who can't articulate what he knows in words. If the teacher's relying on a lab report, this will be a false negative. So think of how frustrating that is to Billy. Conversely, here's a student named John. John, these are just boys by coincidence, by the way. This is a stock photo. John is just looking on to what his classmates are doing, catching the buzz in the classroom. He's actually not doing the experiment at all. If John writes up a lab report by catching the buzz in the classroom, he could be assessed as knowing the practices when in fact he doesn't even have the data he's talking about. This will be a false positive. And this is problematic for John because he'll get passed along and then he'll hit a wall eventually. So this is a problem for both John and for educators. So we designed Inq-ITS to pair with curriculum agnostic packages. It's NGSS aligned, they're online labs, and they use our patented AI. This includes virtual labs that assess and personalize the learning of science. In physical, life, and earth science, grades 4 through 11, we're now doing up to grade 11. Standards aligned content, and they address students' known difficulties with inquiry, including the mathematics associated with inquiry or associated with science, and writing in science, the claim evidence reasoning writing. These labs allow for faster, rigorous class and individual assessment for formative and summative use, and they support differentiated learning. There's no installation required, just a web browser and internet access, and they work on iPads, Chromebooks, Apples, PCs, etc. So here's Inq-IT's core components. Imagine a student here on the left doing a virtual lab. While they're working, everything is being tracked. Every mouse click, every change to the simulation, every pull down widget, everything they write, absolutely everything. And then using our AI, they're being assessed in real time. And this then is generating real-time reports, alerts, and tips, which you see on the top, that supports teachers' instruction and teachers' assessment. And if the teacher chooses to work with Rex in real time, the kids are getting help aligned to the difficulties that they're having. So Rex is jumping in for each practice at the subcomponent level. So we have operationalized each practice into its respective subcomponents, and we're tracking what kids are doing and generating assessment metrics on the sub-practices. To date, we have, 1.55 million labs used in 14,000 schools by 16,000 teachers and 187,000 students. So we're really excited about that. So in terms of components for students, we have authentic labs. We have Rex, a personal tutor that the teacher can optionally use. And we have Spanish glossaries and Rex help. And we have student reports. Now, Rex, as I said, jumps in real time based on the difficulties the students are having. So this is actionable support that the student can implement to help on their next lab. We know that Rex support leads to robust learning of the practices that then transfers. And we've tested this, funded by the National Science Foundation, up to 170 days. So we did this very rigorous study where we engaged with Rex, dropped Rex out. 40 days later, they did another content unit. Another 40 days, they did another content unit. Another 70 days, they did another content unit. And you see growth across those time periods. In terms of teachers, we have a series of different kinds of reports, both the whole class reports and individual student reports. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I'll just tell you there's lots of different reports and teachers use different reports for different purposes. What we also have is a real-time alerting dashboard for whole class, small group, or one-to-one support. So as the students are working, the teacher can use the dashboard and get alerted in real time. And so the alert is going to give the teacher specific information as to who's struggling and how they're struggling on a specific practice. If the teacher looks down the middle there where it says recent alerts and looks down and sees what practice the different students are struggling with, the teacher may notice that many students are struggling with the same practice. He or she could actually switch to the whole class view and get a metric on how many kids are struggling with that practice. So say if kids were struggling with designing controlled experiments, it might say 87% of your kids are struggling with this because they're not targeting the variable they said they were going to target, or they're changing too many variables across trials. So the teacher could then stop the class in real time and have a class discussion about how you collect on unconfounded data. When the teacher runs the with the dashboard in real time with one-to-one, they might see an alert. They click on that alert, and it'll tell the teacher specifically how that student is doing and where their performance is needs support. The teacher can actually look down to the bottom part on the right-hand side and see what that student has done today. So that gives the teacher some really actionable and contextualized information about how the student is doing, and the teacher then uses this to guide support to the students. What we also built, which was really interesting, the NSF funded us to record what teachers were saying when they provided help to students. And then what we did was we looked where the support seemed very robust. And we defined that by saying when students were capable of transferring what they knew to a new content area on their next Inq-ITS lab. So then we went back, we culled from that discourse, we used a technique called epistemic network analysis, developed at University of Madison, Wisconsin. And then we cull that information into these teacher inquiry practice supports called tips. So the teacher can actually press on any one of these 4 tips or use them in order to have these conversation starters for students. And we know that these lead to robust support that then transfers across content areas. So in terms of efficacy for students, we have a number of studies that show that REX leads to robust learning, as I mentioned before, tested up to 170 days. Students are more systematic with hands-on experimentation and will actually spontaneously say to their lab partner, hey, remember what we learned in Inq-ITS. So that's really interesting because without being prompted to think about that, they're actually using what they've learned. We know that English language learners, special ed learners, and kids on IEPs show marked improvement. In fact, at-risk kids did better at home with Inq-ITS and REX than they did in their regular classrooms during COVID. And we have a paper on that. We know that as kids do more and more labs, the standard deviation goes down over time, which means that it's decreasing the achievement gap in science. And everybody is really interested in that because when you have a program that tends to train strategies, what often happens is the kids who are highly skilled get better and better and better, and the kids who tend to lag behind actually just get a little bit better over time. So we're really happy about that. And then we also know that many schools have reported marked improvement on their science state summative tests, including New Jersey, which we'll talk about today, Oregon, Arizona, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, etc., after just adding Inq-ITS for assessment and support. One thing that we're really proud of as well is that we asked 300 and some students what they thought about their teachers, knowing this really fine-grained information about them. And they said, we may not necessarily like it, but we know it's important to our learning. So we're really very excited about that. So on our website, we have a bunch of papers. We have almost 100 papers on Inq-ITS. So if you want to look at that, you can check out our website. In terms of teachers' efficacy regarding assessment, we know that the auto scoring greatly reduces teachers' grading time of labs. The algorithms match human scoring with up to 95% accuracy. And it's really helping to identify those who are simply parroting, those I referred to earlier, and those who can do science but not successfully write about it. So those are the kids at the extreme ends. And so teachers can get a really good metric. So for example, using our dashboard, they could walk over to the student who's only parroting and say, hey, I see that you've written a good claim evidence reasoning statement. Now let's go back and pair that with an experiment. Alternatively, the student who's really good at doing science but not writing about it, the teacher can walk over and say, hey, Wendy, hey, Johnny, I see that you're doing really well at these practices. Let me help you write a claim evidence reasoning statement. We know that's very difficult for students. So if claim evidence reasoning is a need for a broad range of kids in your class, you could put some data up and say, well, let's together write a claim evidence reasoning statement as a class. Regarding instruction, we know that Inq blotters alerts enable teachers to give more personalized help to more students more accurately and more quickly than typical approaches. It helps teachers identify students that typically go unidentified. And that's been very interesting for teachers. And lastly, these alerts and tips in our dashboard that we refer to as Inq blotter, used by teachers, lead to demonstrable student improvement. So as I said before, Inq-ITS is used in 50 states and 12 countries for formative assessment and instruction, and it supports a very wide range of learners. So now I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Jen Lane, and I will have to stop sharing. And I will have to make her host. Now, let me see.
You know what? I don't have a copy of this. So
I was gonna say,
Janice,
Janice,
oh, okay.
You're gonna be clicking on for.
Oh, okay. No problem. Okay. How's that, Jen?
looks good.
Okay.
So welcome everybody. My name is Jennifer Lane. As previously discussed, I am the secondary supervisor in Brick Township Schools, New Jersey. Can you go to the next slide? We are located in central New Jersey at the beach. I have some close neighborhood friends here in the webinar with us today in relative distance to us, but I have two masters, a master of arts and teaching and a master's of science and educational leadership. I've been the supervisor of science for grades K through 12 since 2019. So this is my 5th year in the position. Prior to that, I was a science academic or instructional coach for grades K through 5. I was named an Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellow for the 2016 cohort and was placed at NASA Aeronautics. And that's really where I did a lot of my studying for the NGSS and understanding the standards and what really was expected from them. And then my time in the classroom was as a grade 8 science teacher from 2004 to 2016. So I have 20 years experience. That's kind of where I come from, and have different roles have allowed me to kind of understand the standards at a much greater depth than I think some teachers would have had the opportunity to do. So what we're going to do today is talk about one of the schools in my district, Lake Riviera Middle School, varying demographic, and lots of interesting results from there. So the first thing that I really loved from comparing OpenSciEd to Inq-ITS was that, using OpenSciEd in New Jersey, it is our model curriculum. It may not be for you in other states, but it is a comprehensive spiral curriculum in middle school, where different standards are paired together. Things are not taught in silos or isolation as far as content is concerned. But we also group the science and engineering practices into what we call 3 different buckets. Students are assessed on their investigating skills, their sense-making skills, and their critiquing skills. And those are organized, as you can see here, by the science and engineering practices. What is really interesting to me, and why I started looking at Inq-ITS even when I was in the classroom as a teacher, doing my lab reports, I always had my students graph and analyze their data anytime that we did a in-depth lab or investigation. And I'll be honest, by the time December came around, if I had to look at one more graph and spend an entire week trying to teach kids how to set up scale on the side of, an axis, I was going to pull my hair out. And we spent so much time graphing everything that I didn't have time really to work on the analysis, which is the science practice. So I know a lot of teachers can sympathize with that and understand that, but that's initially what gravitated me towards Inq-ITS, because of the graphing capability. Once students kind of get involved with a simulation, it graphs them for them. And the emphasis is on looking at how different variables can change data and what that means for the reasoning. So Inq-ITS really helps without getting bogged down. Not saying that we still don't graph in our classes, we still graph our own data, we still go through that process, but we can, in different ways, kind of speed that process up just to make sure that we get to the analysis. And I have to say, Inq-ITS really does a great job with the sense making. It really is about the analysis and the interpretation, and students being able to reason that. And that's why it links so well with OpenSciEd, because of the way that the practices are introduced in the curriculum and how we can assess them in the Inq-ITS assessment tool. So when we're talking about OpenSciEd, if you're not familiar with it, there are 6 units per grade level, and they're mixed between life science, physical science, and earth space science. So what we do in our district, we follow the OpenSciEd scope and sequence for all grades 6, 7, and 8. Prior to adopting OpenSciEd, we were using handwritten CERs and explanations prior to bringing Inq-ITS into the fold, and they were all hand graded, and they typically aligned with whatever investigation or lab that we were doing. What we're doing now is we're utilizing Inq-ITS as they align specifically to the content that's being taught in our OpenSciEd units to really continue that focus on sense-making skills. And as Janice said before about the transfer tasks, you really know a student knows and can be able to do science if they can encounter the same type of content, make a reasoning for it in a different context. They can actually transfer that work. And that's what Inq-ITS is really helping to show that our students are able to do. So we feel really confident with the connection that we have between OpenSciEd and Inq-ITS. In New Jersey, each teacher who is not what we call an SGP teacher, which is typically English and math, teachers have SGO focus areas, which is an assessment that's given, and teachers are scored on how their students do on SGOs, the student growth objectives. A science teacher would be expected in New Jersey to do 2 different SGOs, and we use Inq-ITS for that process. Here you see we have a pacing guide where you can see for the scope and sequence for 8th grade, we have all 8 of the OpenSciEd units. But in addition to that, you'll see directly under it, we've already identified the specific Inq-ITS simulations that would lend itself to the content of that. So you're not doing something abstract to understand if they know how to do the sense-making skills, but really it's within the context of the learning that they're doing. So it really helps to solidify those transfer tasks. So for our 8th grade SGO assessment, we focus in on analyzing and interpreting data, and we've done that the past few years. So we use Inq-ITS, a specific group of Inq-ITS, and we also track longitudinally throughout the year because we want students to be able to construct, analyze, and interpret graphical displays, because that's what they do on our state assessment, and to be able to distinguish between dependent and independent variables. That feedback came from our high school teachers, that kids were coming up and they were struggling figuring out, X axis, Y axis. They were really just guessing at this point. So we wanted to focus in on students being able to correctly identify those variables so that they could make sense of the reasons that they were coming up for the phenomena that they saw. And then lastly, again, it's about the phenomena. Can students use data to effectively explain the phenomena that they see within reasonable expectations? So we're using Inq-ITS for SGO assessment. So everybody has a little bit of skin in the game. It's not just about, constantly talking to the kids, but the teachers have a vested interest as well, because they are given their evaluation score 15 15% of it is based on their SGO assessments. So they are taking the time to practice all of these sense-making pieces as they go through the year. We were very excited for our results to come back for NJSLA. Like, I was seething, kind of, really upset that my ELA and math friends got their data in June and I had to wait all the way till the end of August, because I really felt like we were going to be moving the needle, and we did. So this chart really shows how New Jersey represents their assessment data. We get it represented not only by domain, which would be earth, space science, life science, and physical science, but we also get scores in those science and engineering practice buckets of investigating, sense making, and critiquing. So I have the state assessment data here. At the performance level, the state average for a level 3, which would be meeting expectations, and a level 4 would be exceeding expectations. Lake Riviera Middle School scored higher than the state average, which we were thrilled about, but they made 8% gains within one school year, really focusing in on Inq-ITS and using SGOs to assess it. We saw domain growth in each of the 3 categories, and I believe I can anecdotally connect that because the students were using Inq-ITS that were directly aligned to the content that they were learning. So it really helped them understand those key concepts. But what was really exciting was looking at the subclaim buckets. So for investigating, the state average for students near and meeting expectations was 30. Lake Riviera consistently has scored 35 the past 2 years. So we're not losing any ground. We're maintaining or gaining ground. And when it came to sense making, which is a huge piece of why we use Inq-ITS because of its analysis and data component, we grew 4 percentage points from the year before. And again, the state average was 26 and we were at 29. So you can see we're either meeting or exceeding the state average, which in science is difficult. These are lower scores. It's an incredibly difficult assessment in New Jersey. Time on task for the students, with it only being maybe 12 or 15 questions per unit, the stamina that the students need to take this assessment, because they have to filter through at least 3 tabs of data before they even get to the question, which is a multiple choice question. So they really need to analytically look at what they're being given and making sense of it in a very short amount of time. So we're really happy with the results that we're seeing by being able to use our state model curriculum of OpenSciEd with the compilation and the comparison, and using Inq-ITS to ensure that those transfer tasks that our kids really can do what we think they can, and they're not just parroting information back to us. This is a 3-year. The previous chart was just from the year previous, but this is a 3-year trend. You can see our 2018-19 data. That was the year before COVID. It was the first year of our New Jersey state assessment. And we were pretty happy with the results, considering, it was a brand new test. It was brand new standards. We were okay with where we were, and we were really very close to the state average. Then, of course, we know 2019, 2020, the COVID year, we don't have data from there. But while we did not meet where we were prior to 2018, we are equal to or better the state standards. But we're thrilled, again, we're seeing growth in our investigating. We were doing great before COVID. We're doing even better now because students have that connection and are able to run more and more investigations because of the timeliness of it. Our sense-making skills have really exploded. Again, I believe due to Inq-ITS, because we're constantly focusing on analysis of data and critiquing. We still have a little bit of work to do. That's where our writing and our communication piece comes in. But when you're really kind of talking about CERs making claims, providing evidence and reasoning, 8th grade students psychologically, we're not really sure if they can really match those standards, but we're making great strides with communicating what that looks like. So this is a little bit of a longitudinal piece since the inception of the NJSLA assessment. And by 22-23, we are either at or above the state average in every category. So really excited about this partnership. The students like it. Inq-ITS has been very interested in our feedback from our teachers and have really listened to how we use it with OpenSciEd, because they really want students to get the most out of the program. I have to say also, I showed it to another colleague in another district today who came to see OpenSciEd working in our school. And I also mentioned how we use Inq-ITS, and I was very quickly just trying to show her, you know, how students would go through it. I'll tell you what, Rex called me out about 8 times, and I was so impressed with the detailed message that he gave me. It wasn't just, you know, your claim is wrong, go back and fix it. It was, go back to the goal again and see what you're trying to investigate, and then choose a claim that aligns to that goal. That was the feedback that I had received from Rex, which is such a poignant piece of the AI that goes with Inq-ITS, because the students are really like, oh, what was the goal? I was just clicking on anything. I guess I have to really read this now. And I've been going through our teachers' data. I can see their whole class and individual data. And what I like about it is, for the students who are scoring really well, it also gives a data point on how many times Rex was needed. So students can do really well on the performance, but if you're seeing that they're using Rex maybe 6, 10, 20 times, that's a great conversation starter that you can have with the student to say, you're doing great, but how come Rex has to help you so much? Maybe, you know, let's look at what we're doing. So we're looking at tracking progress with Inq-ITS for our students this year. That's a department goal for us in grades 6, 7, and 8. And we're also implementing student trackers where they set their own goals by reviewing their own data to make sure that they're really paying attention to the things that they're doing and taking ownership of how they can really incorporate these investigating, sense-making, and critiquing pieces. So it's really very interesting. I saw there was a question
it's Ron Antonori. Good to see you again, like I said. And I'll see you on Friday, I guess, right? So a question I had for you is, when it comes to the use of this with OpenSciEd, as you know, teachers typically say it's difficult to get through an OpenSciEd unit, especially in year 1.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, how do you make the time for Inq-ITS in such an intense curriculum where time is of the essence?
Sure, that's a great question, and something that we've been actively discussing this year. In the initial phases of adopting OpenSciEd, it's incredibly overwhelming because OpenSciEd is such a robust curriculum. They've planned for every possible scenario, every differentiation, every piece of equity that you can think of for any type of student. So when teachers encounter a curriculum like that, it's intense and it's very scary. Now that we're in year 3 with it, I was just observing today a group of teachers using it in our 6th grade in one of the schools. Now that they're becoming more familiar and using OpenSciEd, they're able to make more timing choices, Ron, where they're like, nope, I don't need to do that because we're going to wrap it up with Inq-ITS. So they can manipulate. I can't imagine any school district being able to get through every single lesson of OpenSciEd in all 6 units because of the fact that they've planned for everything. But the more our teachers are using OpenSciEd, they can make those curricular decisions based on the students that they have in their room. If they have an accelerated group, if they have a special education group, they know the big idea of OpenSciEd, and based on the performance expectations, what students are supposed to get out of a unit. And once they've accomplished that, the teachers know that they can move on. They don't have to just go through the lessons. So we are implementing more Inq-ITS than we ever have before, because the teachers are becoming much more familiar with the OpenSciEd curriculum as a whole, and they can make better curricular decisions, and they can use the feedback that they get from Inq-ITS in their investigations that they're doing in OpenSciEd. It really does go hand in hand.
So because you're in year 3, you have that luxury. For a school district in year 1 of OpenSciEd, is there a correlation between like, hey, you're in this part of an OpenSciEd unit, now might be a good time to use this Inq-IT?
So we've done that. We've done that work ourselves in our pacing guide. We've created for every unit, we have a pacing guide, and we've already identified the appropriate Inq-ITs that would fit nicely in that unit based on teacher feedback. So the 8th grade unit on sound waves, there are a number of Inq-ITs on sound and how waves travel, and the teachers know which ones to use as introductory and which ones as formative feedback and which ones to use as advanced with that. So based on teacher feedback, we've really created a pacing guide to figure out which Inq-ITs align best with OpenSciEd in which units.
Thank you,
We
Jen.
did that work on our own. Yeah.
Thanks.
And Jennifer,
Also, Ron, along those lines, another teacher with whom I spoke said that they would look at the students' performance using Inq-ITs and then decide what practice the kids were really having trouble with, and then kind of feed forward, teach that practice in the context of that Inq-ITs lab and that OpenSciEd unit, and then let kids progress on their own from there. So they would use the Inq-ITs data as formative and feed forward to help support kids on the specific practice. Because the practices, even though the NGSS is 3-dimensional, the practices give them something very concrete to hold on to. And I think that really is kind of cyclical in its understanding and helping them kind of level up their understanding as they iterate through the OpenSciEd curriculum. We also have a little bit more data to show you. So here's some, once I had heard about these nice results, I drilled down on some labs that the Brick students had done. And here's an example of Lab 2, Waves in a Drum, Lab 6, Free Fall Energy, and Lab 9. So this represents 3 snapshots across the year. And this is broken down by NGSS practice. We grabbed some of these: questioning, planning and conducting, analyzing and interpreting. Then we have the average inquiry score with no CER, and then the average inquiry score with CER, because we know that kids struggle on CER. So if you look across the year on the 3 labs, you have 53.6, 68, and then 83. So you see a nice improvement there. 62, 71, 87, 47, 51, 74, 51, 63, 81. And then here, this one, we're not auto scoring waves in a drum at that point, then 55 and 75. So you see a really nice progression across the year. When you break this down in terms of the New Jersey clusters, so you see this on the right, you have the investigating cluster, which is questioning and planning and conducting. Then you have the sense-making cluster, which is analyze, interpret data, and writing their claim. And then you have the arguing from evidence cluster, which is the evidence and the reasoning in the Inq-ITs assessment. So you see across labs 2, 6, and 9, a progression from 58, 69 to 85, and then a progression of 48 when you assess the claim via the widget, because we assess students' claim and evidence in 2 ways. They use a widget to select evidence and make a claim, but they also write it in open response. So when we're looking at our widget data, you have 48, 57, and 72. When you're talking about students' written claims, this lab 2 wasn't auto scored at the time. So we have 43 and then jumping to 52. Then the evidence score, you have 39, 46, and 66. And then the written, you have 25, where you see students really struggle with the writing, and then it's up to 57% on the lab 9, which is not quite their last lab. And then the reasoning, which is written, you have at lab 6, 22.8, and then at lab 9, 46.5. So students are definitely learning along those lines. I grabbed a couple students of interest. These both are special ed students, because when Jen and I presented this exact PowerPoint in New Jersey at the Science Convention a couple months ago in October in Princeton, One of the special ed teachers was there and told me how incredible her special ed students are doing with Inq-ITS. And so we grabbed some data. So here is student A. The baseline is a lab we call Flower. It's a sort of a domain general lab. This is October 18th from last academic year. And then lab time 2 is in March, and this is our animal cell lab. So on asking questions, this student has gone from 25 to 67%, on planning and conducting from 50% to 67%, on analyzing and interpreting data from 22 to 100, and a cumulative score on communicating from 46 to 72. When you break the claim evidence reasoning down in their respective subcomponents, the student went from 69 to 100, from 54 to 50, so they slid a little there, and on the reasoning from 25 to 69, which is a huge leap, especially for reasoning, because it's really the hardest thing students do. Here's another student who started off higher than the other student. Again, this is the same labs, Flower on October 18th, and this is Plant Cell on March 7th. But the student has jumped from 75 to 100 on asking questions, from 0 to 100 on planning and conducting, from 72 to 100 on analyzing and interpreting, and 76 to 71 on communicating. On claim evidence reasoning, the student is really struggling with writing their written evidence. You can see that. That's a difficult thing for students to do. But in claim evidence reasoning in general, you see increase from 88 to 100, from 95, the student dropped, and then from 56 to 75. So in terms of an overarching summary, Inq-ITS is based on learning sciences research regarding students' difficulties with science practices, students' misconceptions, etc., and knowledge about cross-cutting concepts. It aligns to NGSS curricula, including OpenSciEd. It was designed as NGSS neutral. So any curriculum that goes with NGSS can be paired with Inq-ITS. It supports all students, regardless of gender, SES, ELL status, etc. And here we focused on showing data with respect to the New Jersey clusters of investigating, sense making, and critiquing. For teachers, it provides automatic, rigorous scoring of all students' inquiry processes and competencies, including doing versus communicating. So this is really rich for teachers because they can quickly get a snapshot of the students who are simply parroting or good at writing but poor on the doing of the practices, versus the kids who are good at doing and lack the communicating skills, the communication skills. And so that's a really nice, a really quick snapshot that a lot of teachers like to get from one of our types of reports, of which we have many. And then our automatic reports and alerts tell the teacher who to focus on and where they need help. And then these tips, these teacher inquiry practice supports, give them conversation starters that are based on real teacher data. And all of this helps realize NGSS. So we are offering a free trial. You could send an email to Caitlin at Sales@Apprentice if you have any questions. We're really proud of some accolades that we've received in the last handful of years for our work. And I'm now on the PISA committee on AI. So this is a really, really interesting. Spoke at the White House last year, etc. And now I'd like to open it up to some questions, a Q&A.
I see some questions going around in the chat about the alignment document. So everyone who's registered for the webinar, I will send that document as well as a recording. And then thank you to Jennifer for providing that.
Yeah, so to clarify with the pacing too, the pacing is just the OpenSciEd pacing guide. We just simply follow that, and we've embedded Inq-ITS. We've aligned via Inq-ITS for each of the units. So the pacing guide is really just the OpenSciEd pacing guide by unit.
Just to follow up a question on that pacing guide, because you said I'm working with a district now and we're in a year 2, year 3 of implementation, but we're also trying to make curricular decisions. does your pacing guide reflect any curricular decisions you're making? It doesn't. It's just
Not
the
at
teachers
this
are.
point. Yeah, now that we're through year 3, this summer, we hope to convene groups of teachers to really do that hard work of deciding which lessons need to be combined or let go, and where exactly we want the Inq-ITS to go. But I wanted it to go through 3 years first, so that we could really make those decisions. But teachers are making those decisions in the classroom, and I trust them at this point to do that.
Okay. Yeah. It's always just nice to see what other districts are doing. And so, it's just nice to learn from other districts that have been doing it. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other
Are there
questions?
other questions? I don't see the chat actually.
Yeah, Janice, do you envision like some point going to your platform, selecting an OpenSciEd unit that you're in, or like a specific unit in a specific lesson maybe, and then seeing a corresponding Inq-IT that could be used? Kind of like the work that Jen did in Brick on her own. Do you imagine that being a part of the platform? So
We certainly could. We do have those crosswalks developed, and I don't think they're on our website, are they, Caitlin?
The alignment documents, no, they're not on our website. They're kind of just as I speak to a school that uses OpenSciEd basis.
Yeah, but we do have those, Ron. So if anybody does want them, we can definitely send them over, or we could actually put them on our website too. That wouldn't be a arduous thing to do.
Yeah.
do you know roughly how many Inq-ITs there are per like OpenSciEd unit? And I assume there's at least one Inq-IT for every unit, right? But there's probably several.
Yeah,
There's a lot of well, we have 160 Inq-ITS labs. I don't know how many Inq-ITS labs we have per curriculum unit for OpenSciEd. Again, I could call
Jennifer,
them.
I know you have some knowledge of that. I think it's by grade level in your alignment document.
Yeah, our alignment guide is by grade level, and it varies by topic. It for 6th grade, there's a lot of them because it's weather, plate tectonics. There's quite a few of them, and they have like introductory and advanced. So it really depends on the grade level, but there is at least one Inq-IT per unit per grade. For some, there could be 5 or 6 for a unit alone. So there is no topic that is not referenced or aligned in some way to Inq-ITS.
And Jen, just to be clear, you then did the work of saying, after this lesson, this is a good Inq-IT to use. So for example, if there's a unit with 5 Inq-ITs, you actually didn't just say, here's 5 you can use in the unit, but you said where in the unit to use.
We haven't gotten to where yet.
Oh, okay.
That's going to be the work that we do this summer. Right now, we've just identified the 5. Now we're going to decide where they fit best. Is it after lesson 3? Is it after lesson 7? Now that we've gone through it, that's how we're going to go forward with our dynamic pacing guide.
I know also some teachers in your district told me, Jen, that if we have some topics, many topics, we have an intro and an advanced Inq-IT suite. So they might use the intro Inq-ITs, as a formative assessment early on in the content unit.
Right.
And then at the end of the content unit, use the advanced Inq-ITs lab to really see,
as a summative.
As a summative for that
Absolutely.
unit.
They actually prefer those the most because we're all about growth in our district. So anytime they see an intro and an advanced, they jump on it if it aligns, because again, they use the intro as the formative and kind of early on in the unit, and then the summative is the advanced. And the students can see how they grow once, and it reinforces the scientific concept of being able to explain a phenomena better after they've gotten more information about it. So it just reinforces that idea, and that's how science works as well. So anytime they see a intro and an advanced, they jump all over it, because the kids really like to show how much they've grown with these practices.
We had a quick question in the chat if this is used as a replacement for multiple choice assessment.
For us, it is, but that's also because OpenSciEd does not use traditional assessments. It really The teachers for formative assessments really use the student notebooks and the student worksheets from OpenSciEd. And the Inq-ITS are just an additional layer of assessment for formative or summative. But the OpenSciEd curriculum itself does not use traditional assessments like multiple choice questions. It's all about students really making their thinking visible and what they understand. The core tenets, if you're not familiar with OpenSciEd, is that students see a phenomena and they make a claim and they ask questions about what they think is happening. They investigate those questions, and then they come up with their own reason on why that phenomena happened. That's really the crux of it. So it's very investigatory. There's a lot of graphic organizers. There's a lot of collecting information, observational data. So we don't use traditional assessments anymore. And our NJSLA, our state assessment, while it has multiple choice questions as part of it, they're much more in depth because students have to analyze information in order to answer the multiple choice question.
Right. Jen, I'm sorry to ask so many questions, but this is so intriguing. This is a great webinar. I'm glad I'm here. So when it comes to, like, we don't use multiple choice items, I totally understand that. But I think if I'm to understand you correctly, what Inq-ITS is providing, though, is actionable data.
Yes.
And it's quantifying things, which if you just use OpenSciEd without Inq-ITS, for example, or something, you leave the classroom not 100% sure
Right.
that kids really know what they're supposed to know, because the assessment is usually what to look for and what to listen for. And that could be very difficult to be trying to look for and listen for things among a classroom of 25 students. So is that kind of summarize where
that absolutely is? If you think of Inq-ITS, we address it as, when we use them formatively, it's all about feedback. If a teacher gives enough feedback about a topic, students should perform perfectly or close to perfect on a summative if you're giving enough feedback. And Inq-ITS does give very good that data dashboard, the Inq Bladder. I was looking at some data today. It's very ingrained. Like I said, they can tell you how many times a student used Rex in a particular area, whether it's creating their claim or connecting their hypothesis or choosing independent or dependent variables. It'll tell you how many times they used Rex in each of that. Plus, it tells you, like, you have a group of students that are really struggling with assessment. That would be an opportunity for me to pull those students back into small group and just work with them while everybody else continues working. So yeah, it really does give concrete numbers, I guess you can think of it, to give that feedback to students.
Easy question. How long does a typical Inq-IT take? And are the students taking the Inq-IT by themselves, right? I assume they're taking they're doing this alone.
Yes.
Right?
It'll take 1 to 2 class periods. Our class periods are 55 minutes each day. So it can take anywhere from 1 to 2. The teachers like to model a class that we usually use the flower petal or the ramp, which are the free ones. They usually use that as a class model, and they do it whole group together and walk the students through the process of making a claim and collecting data, and oops, Rex pops up. So they kind of preview it with them, but then from then on, students are working independently on it.
I know there's Jordan, I know you're a teacher that uses Inq-ITS. Like, I know there's a bunch of teachers that use it here, but each of our labs have 3 to 4 investigations. So teachers can assign, so Jennifer, I'm assuming the 2 class periods are assigning most of the investigations.
Right.
But teachers, if they want to assign 1 investigation, usually that takes 20, 30 minutes. So then it makes sense, right? If you assign all 3, that
they like to, and it really, the way Jana said it before was it really is rigorous, because the students can see how changing one variable at a time gives you completely different results. And the teachers like to investigate all of the variables. Sometimes they'll just let them go, and the students will pick whatever question they want to investigate. But if they're in a really tough topic, or if it's something that they see that the students are struggling on, they may assign this group to investigate this variable, but this group's going to investigate this variable, and you do a jigsaw, and they have to share what they learned with each other on it. So there's lots of different ways that the teachers utilize it. But yeah, we try to get as much out of it as we can, investigating all the different variables. And then another informal, I guess, data point for us. In Brick Township, we have a STEM Academy at our high school level, and 8th graders are invited to apply. It's open to anyone. And there is an application test, a placement test. Last year was the first year that every single student who took the test correctly answered the open-ended question on dependent and independent variables. They could correctly. It's a study about coffee's effect on health. Is a random topic. They have no, pre-knowledge about it, but they could correctly identify the independent and dependent variable. And that has never happened before last year. And that I credit that to the 8th grade teachers for constantly using, and 3 years of use of Inq-ITS. Students are coming into the high school and they have no doubt what an independent and a dependent variable is and how to graph it.
I have another question. Are your teachers then not using the transfer tasks that OpenSciEd gives as like more their summative assessment, and then just using the Inq-ITS instead? Because I know the OpenSciEd transfer task can take like few days just to do, and then all that time to grade. So I just want to make sure like
they're doing both.
And that's how we're guiding and using our trial. We're sort of eliminating the transfer task and plunkering Inq-ITS in as the summative.
How it first started, if you do use OpenSciEd, it can get very rote for students very quickly, depending on the topic, especially in 8th grade. Our 8th grade teachers are really struggling because of the routines of it. So we're even looking about moving some stuff. So teachers really latched on to Inq-ITS in the beginning because they needed something different to do.
Yes, that's what we're finding. Absolutely.
They needed just a day or two to kind of break up the monotony. And that's why they gravitated to it originally. But no, we're not eliminating those transfer tasks. We might be modifying them a little bit because, again, it can take 3 days to get through those transfer tasks.
Right.
But they're modifying them a little bit. They're really using the Inq-ITS in throughout the unit to kind of break up the monotony of it.
Okay. So they're assigning them like bit by bit. I know, like Caitlin, you had just said, so they may not be assigning all the goals and taking that full time. They're just doing bit by bit, taking that one lab and like sprinkling it in.
Correct.
Okay.
Marissa, something that I'll say that we're doing in our district right now is we're using Inq-ITS like post concept in OpenSciEd as homework. Because we've been given like we have new administration. So the new administration wants homework like 3 times a week, which is a lot when you're doing OpenSciEd because there is not a lot of homework. So we've been using Inq-ITS that way to like reinforce after the kids have been taught like what we're doing in class with OpenSciEd. I'm seeing mixed success because when they're doing it alone, I can't use the real-time alerts. Then I've got these like backdated reports and I'm trying to like infuse the skills that they need back into like what we do next. But I'm interested to see like what my data comes out at the end of the year, but that's just the way Pine Hill is using it.
Thank you.
I'm happy to jump on a call with you too to go over that data. I know Janice loves that as well. Because the thing about Inq-ITS that I always like to hear teachers is how they use it, because it can be really customizable to, like you said, homework, however you feel as though it fits.
Awesome. I also teach gifted and talented, so that makes a difference as well.
So, any other questions? I know we're past the time. Anything else lingering?
Thank you to both presenters. I just want to say thank you, Jennifer. That was really very helpful. And if you would be willing, because I'm working with, I have a teacher on right now too, and we're in Guttenberg and we're kind of like implementing Inq-ITS and we've been doing OpenSciEd. So maybe we can just keep the conversation going, because like I said, it's really nice to learn what other districts are, not only just getting the OpenSciEd under your belt is just like a whole task in and of itself. And I think that's what drew us to Inq-ITS is, when I saw the presentation, it was like really a way to, like you said, kind of break up the monotony. And I know my teacher Ashley is here, and Ashley, I'm going to steal your line. She said, if my kids hear if we say the word bath bomb again, I think we're going to have like a mutiny on our hands. So, you know,
That or Michaela, it's terrible, but seventh grade
Yes.
teachers would just like Michaela to go off the deep end by the time they're done. Like,
Yes, and that's my 7th grade teacher. We discussed even changing the name of you know, so like students wouldn't like have talked to prior students, you know.
right.
So, you know, we really are looking for ways to motivate the kids to, you know, really take it seriously
Right.
too. And I think that's another piece, and I know we're running out of time, but like just like anything else, we're afraid like maybe Inq-ITS is going to become something that they have to do, like more like a chore. And then we're not really getting accurate data because the kids aren't trying. So, and we can tell that, right? Because we can see they had recs come up so many times, yet they're still scoring a 0. So
Right.
we know they're
just-
not listening to recs, and we have to figure out how to get them to like do it. So that way, you know, they actually are learning, because we did see the other side where the kids that are using recs are making market improvements.
Right.
So I think that's maybe like another, we're looking for ways to like motivate, because we have, you know, every district has its own set of, you know,
Sure.
population and students and things like that. So I'd love to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I put, for anybody that's still here, I put my email address, my school email address in the chat. So feel free, anybody, if you'd like to reach out, I'm more than happy to talk you through anything.
Does anybody else have any other questions? There was the free trial information. You can also contact Caitlin, who's here, Caitlin@apprentice.com. She could get you set up with a free trial. And if you want me to go over your data, I live for that, actually. I actually do live for that.
I know, that's what I was trying to say. Love that.
Right. Former school psychologist. I can comb through students' data all day long. I love it.
Cool. So I will be sending this recording along with the alignment document that Jennifer mentioned.
That
Cool.
sounds great.
That's
So are
all.
there any other questions? Great. It's just getting dark right now.
I know I had to turn on my light mid presentation. It's pitch black out now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone.